All right, welcome everyone to the XojoTalk podcast. I am Paul Lefebvre, the Xojo developer evangelist. And this time, my special guest is Mike Cotrone, owner of Intelligent Visibility, a company that uses Xojo to make some stuff that I'm going to let Mike tell you about. Welcome, Mike. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do with Xojo?
Thanks, Paul. Well, we make software. We make enterprise level software for the networking industry. So we have server-based, and we also have desktop-based, and we also have, software packages that have both, right? And the UI or the desktop pieces I write in Xojo, and we write in Xojo. And we have about six software packages that we have on the market today. So Luminous is one of them. NetAssess is a network assessment software, and it's a combination application where some of it's written in Xojo for the Mac and for Windows, and then the other pieces are written on the server side, which is combination HTML5 and Java. So, and then of course we have the Arista Navigator, which is completely 100% Xojo for desktop, which is on the Mac App Store, as well as go ahead.
Yeah, I saw that Navigator thing you were posting on Twitter about that recently. That just went up on the Mac App Store recently, right?
It did. Last week. It got approved. So I had to fix some of my the way I was doing notifications, and then that got denied. And then last week it went and got approved. So great to have that, as well as Net Toolkit, which I've had on the Mac Store for about a year. So two packages that do well. And the Navigator has been internalized at Arista. Arista Networks is a big, large network manufacturer of equipment for data center products. They compete against Cisco systems a lot of times. So they've internalized a lot of the branding of our software within their engineers and their executives, which has been great. Network World, I'm actually trying to talk with them right now about getting it in their showcase that they do monthly. So we're hoping to get some visibility there as well.
Oh, yeah, that would be fabulous. Sometimes getting a lot of those trade magazines are read by important people that you want to see these sort of stuff.
Absolutely. It's been real fun creating, things that I've envisioned over the years and bringing them to life with Xojo. It's been, I guess, very, that accomplished feeling when you can just create things, design things, and then actually put the software together yourself. So, I started off as a programmer back, in the mid 90s. And I then kind of had that early, decision-making, career. Do you want to be a programmer? Do you want to go into networking? Do you want to stay help desk when I first started? So I started off in C and started off in Perl. And then I also was learning Cisco technologies at the time for Cisco networking. And just the path I naturally went down was the Cisco networking path, and over the years became a Cisco network expert, and also kept my Perl scripting alive during that whole 15-year span. And then back in 2013, after I sold my last company, I was very interested in software development, creating services, products, and using my expert Cisco networking knowledge to bring to life some software packages that really didn't, that weren't on the market today. And in 2013, I began learning from you, Paul, on your VTC training sessions. So that's why when I first met you at Las Vegas, I was like, whoa, that's Paul.
Oh, the VTC ones that I did. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, those are probably a little bit out of date now.
Yeah. Back in 2013 was great because, I'd done nothing with object-oriented programming, so I had a whole lot to learn. And you saw my posts back from 2013 on, and you probably noticed they've gotten increasingly better over time. So, of course, like Tim and Kem and a lot of the forum users have been tremendous and a lot of pointing me in the right directions and even helping me with flat-out coding. So it's been a great experience.
So the apps you make, are they all Mac and Windows? You get some combination? Because you said the Arista thing is that just in the Mac App Store?
So the Arista Navigator is Mac only. Net Toolkit, which again is a Mac app for network engineering toolkits stuff. I started off with that application with Mac and Windows. I use Xojo to compile for both platforms. And, the Mac store is nice. It's a 30%, margin that they take from you. However, distribution, I don't have to worry about, patch management, credit card transactions, anything logistically speaking. So, when you pay salespeople to work in your companies and sell your products and services, you're generally going to be paying between 20 and 30% of gross profit out anyway. So from my standpoint, I love to have it less, but 30% is about, in line with what you would expect from a sales perspective. With my about 160 sales in last year's calendar year for Net Toolkit, which was maybe about 3/4 of a year, I had 0 sales on the Windows side. I had the demo approach, trial approach on the Windows side, and of course, I wrote code to manage the versions and whatnot. But it didn't seem like the Windows. I guess people coming to my software for that specific product for Windows, they could use a trial, maybe get what they wanted, and then, I guess not use it anymore or what. So I noticed that it wasn't taking off on the Windows side. So I figured when I did a UI redesign in version 2.0, I figured I would just stick with Mac version for OS X. And, knowing we've got it publicized well on our websites outside of the Mac store, I would pay attention to people saying, hey, by the way, are you continuing it for Windows? And to this day, almost a year and a half later, I have not gotten any emails on the Windows, platform for that. So, but yes, it is compilable for Windows as well. And Arista Navigator is the same situation where right now it's only for Mac, but I have, my target statements specifically around, my declares and whatnot for Mac to allow myself to compile it for Windows when, that time comes. And I assume that will come for the Arista Navigator, as it's been a very popular product out the door right now from, again, with all the publicity I'm getting within Arista, themselves. So.
That's interesting. Could it just be that there's less competition on the Mac for stuff like this that make it more, visible than maybe the Windows one would be? That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know if it's a conditioning thing where iOS people, they're used to, iPhone users are used to going to the iOS store and they read what the app is about. They see some pictures and that's $1 or $5. Yeah, I'm going to grab that. I'm going to get that. And they buy it. Mac App Store, same thing. Generally, you're buying your, $1 to $100 apps, and same type of concept. And I think people are just on the Mac OS X, they're conditioned to, if I like that app, I'm going to buy that app. And that's maybe a difference with, and I'm a Windows to Mac convert from about 6 years ago. So I myself, from a Windows perspective, would try software also. I would see either, it's great, or it solved my quick issue during that trial period and then not need to spend the $20 later. So, what I probably, in hindsight, should probably do is come back and rewrite the Windows version to not include a trial. We use FastSpring for that, for the distribution of it. And, I'll probably end up coming back when I come back with Arista Navigator Windows as well, and not make a trial, but just purchase this version if you like what you see here, just similar to Mac Store. So.
Right. Yeah. FastSpring is great for that sort of stuff. Well, one thing to keep in mind is with Windows 10, supposedly the Windows Store is going to be allowing regular desktop apps in addition to the funky UI apps that are also in there now. And so that might be some sort of option for, particularly because Windows 10 being probably a free upgrade for a lot of people is probably going to get some rapid adoption, and software that people can easily buy through a store might be a new experience and might take off too.
That's encouraging. I'm seeing quite a bit of posts lately for the Windows Store, so I'm hoping to see some good feedback on the forums for people doing that. That'd be great.
Yeah, it'll be good to see. I'm running Windows 10 in a VM here. Not full-time yet for my Xojo work. I'm still using Windows 8, but I keep it open pretty often, and it's nice. It has a lot of updates and stuff, and it keeps changing. And, they're saying, we're going to release it this summer. And I'm like, geez, I don't know. You get so many updates. It seems like it's not going to be, maybe when they're talking summer, they're thinking September rather than what I'm thinking like July, but.
Yeah. And I tell you, another application that I'm working on specifically from a networking point of view is it's called iPerf Agent, and it's 100% Xojo code. It's actually console server application that's designed to be middleware that runs in, it can run in Mac, but I'm positioning it to be run into a Linux VM appliance that, I hardened from that perspective. And what it does is it's a latency management system for networks, right? Being able to run iPerf tests, manage the whole entire session, basically take the results, parse it, put it into a SQLite database, rinse and repeat, having a configuration file that allows the administrator to set up as many sessions as they would like. And what this does is it goes out and tests the latency of the point A to point B connection. And with the proper strategy, where if you have a large enterprise network or a network in general, you would position iPerf in different parts of your network. iPerf agent would then connect to those network endpoints and measure the results on a full-time interval basis, right? And then if you take that into consideration with a lot of our customers are using like Amazon AWS cloud services for their ERP systems, we actually have this customer that I'm writing this app for, starting off custom, but it's going to end up an actual product. We have an iPerf version running in their AWS service as well to measure latency up to their cloud service. So we're trying to cover all bases to ensure that, we can figure out what the latency situation is on all legs of their network. And then it feeds, my Xojo code actually writes to an SNMP agent locally to our Linux server. So it allows, SolarWinds, Zabbix, other network management solutions to pull the data from our app into their, network management solution so we can follow the workflows that they have, graphs and, all the fancy notifications and everything else those network management systems have. So.
Well, I got to say that sounds impressive. I can't say I understood all the acronyms that you were using in there, but not being a networking expert, but that sounds quite impressive and useful for people that do have large networks. I remember when I worked in bigger companies, this was kind of a constant source of issues that had to be tracked down often. So.
It is. And, it is a lot of network lingo I'll probably be slinging during this conversation. So all my networking friends will be laughing and all the Xojo people are like, what is he talking about? But I tell you, it's been a great experience using Xojo for Linux apps, specifically with console. NetAssess, which is our network, assessment software that is part Xojo for the UI for Mac and Windows. And then it's HTML5 and Java for the server side. But having the NetAssess with Xojo, I have a component. It's actually two applications in one, so to speak. I have a collector that's Xojo console code that runs, on our Arista switches. It runs in Linux, servers. It also runs in Windows servers, and it's constantly basically polling network devices, querying information from those network devices, and just completely interrogating these devices on a full-time basis while feeding the information to my actual Xojo UI sitting on the desktop, whether it's Mac or Windows. And it uses a protocol that I've created or invented. Actually, I have a patent pending on the EVIP protocol that, if you remember back from maybe 2 Novembers ago, you saw a lot of postings where I was trying to figure out, bit streams and whatnot with, structures for creating that. So, but yeah, it's worked out real well. And, that same protocol we use among, communications from my Xojo side of the app to our web side of the app as well.
So on the Xojo apps, are they often communicating with something that is running? My ignorance is going to show through, but getting this information about the network, are there typically like OS level things you have to access, or are there tools that you're connecting to, or are you using Xojo features to talk to something on the network?
Yeah, I use all of the network sockets very, very much. I shell out quite a bit on Linux and Mac, and I'll get system level information, run commands and get the information, scrape it, and do whatever I do with it. I use a lot of regular expressions. So Kem Tech and I will be proud. He's helped me tremendously in the past with regular expressions, and not to mention, it's a huge, powerful feature that I use on a daily basis with Xojo. But yeah, we use, of course, SSL, we use TLS, we use TCP. I use Monkey Bread's plugins very often when it comes to curl and multi-curl, which has been a tremendous, feature for the Arista Navigator, where we have a attack assistant feature as part of the Arista Navigator, where when you're working with their technical support people on an Arista issue, it Arista is a network switch that is based on, Fedora core Linux. So to retrieve a lot of the support information that the TAC engineers need, it takes, some Linux skill, which some network engineers either have or maybe have not. But nonetheless, it takes a lot of time, even with the experience, to gather all the information. So my tool basically is a click here, check check what you want, click here, and it goes and retrieves all the information. Basically, I'm using, multi-curl with the Monkey Bread software plugin to get all that. It brings it to me. I basically zip it up with Monkey Bread zip, plugin as well. And I get it available for that user to email to the TAC engineer without really having to do that much. So that's been, huge. So I've been able to really utilize all the networking features from a coding perspective with Xojo.
Neat. So this is a lot of apps that sound very involved. Do you create all these yourself? You must be working like 80 hours a day or something like that.
Well, I've got staff. We've got people working with us. On non-Xojo developers, I've got contractors. I've got employees. I also have used, Chem Tech and Kevin Cully, great Xojo developers that have used on contract as well. And Richard Summers has been a tremendous asset to us. He's a Xojo community member as well. But what's unique about Richard is he has the uncanny ability, and of course I have none of it. When it comes to UI, when it comes to graphics, he's a graphic designer. He's also very good at UI. And, he's also a developer. So he's been basically almost full time with us, developing our brand in terms of graphics. Right. All the UIs you see on our desktop software at one point or another, or is completely from Richard in terms of design. So the Xojo community has been a great place for us to connect with, not just people helping us, but people actually contracting with us to assist us in scaling, the code situation, because, we have 5 products out right now and a 6th one coming. And it's a lot of work. So we've got a lot of people, but the nice thing is having the Xojo specific support's been very good.
Yeah, it is great that there is a pretty vibrant community that's available to do this sort of stuff. And I will point out for other people that are listening, Mike, as he mentioned earlier, is one of the people that definitely takes advantage, or did in the past anyway, when he was a newbie, of the community that's in the forum and asking questions, getting answers, learning from that. And I'm rather impressed. He said he started with Xojo in 2013, and now it's only a couple of years later, and he's banged out all these apps with help and learning, and that's quite an impressive accomplishment. So kudos.
Thanks,
to you.
Paul. But yeah, that's Real Studio. I came across Real Studio. It's funny. I got very, into home automation at that time in 2012, 2013, and came across, these gateways that, controlled a lot of my AV stuff and a lot of, my gates and a lot of things that were great around the house. And I used, HomeSeer software to do that. So I'm like, I would like to control these gateways myself. And I downloaded a piece of software that was for Mac. And I'm like, hey, this is pretty neat. And at the bottom, I had the little Real Studio, made with Real Studio icon at the bottom right. And like, what is that? So clicked on it, checked it out. I'm like, well, this is interesting, because I had a couple C# start and stops back in 2010, 2011, where, C# I found was very intuitive, but it didn't give me the graphic, at least Visual Studio back then didn't give me that graphical instant feedback that maybe my personality needs. But Xojo, or Real Studio at the time, did. And the minute I opened it, I'm like, wow, here's a window, and I can actually put some controls on it. So, even though today what I do, about maybe 90% of what I do is code oriented, it's I started off visually, and that's what got me hooked and got me to creating certain things, and within minutes. And then let me take this other idea and make another test app. And so I spent basically 2013 to almost 2014 making these test apps to, number one, increase my skills, number two, kind of prove that I can make software the way I really want to, and the way my enterprise customers expect and come to expect with software from big manufacturers like Arista, Cisco, VMware, so on and so forth. So.
Now, speaking of your customers, did you have a lot of connections that allow you to kind of target this sort of thing, or have you been just how have you found the business niche essentially that you're working with here?
Yeah, so the business side, that's something I've been. We're based in Greensboro, North Carolina, and my last company, my business partner Bill Demerson and I, we started a Cisco network consulting company, and we grew it very successfully. We were one of the top partners in a multiple state region for Cisco as a partner, and we sold Cisco equipment, their software, their support, and our services. And we built our own managed services platform where we actually had a software as a service with our engineers. So we're able to build a big, large customer base out of that was wrapped around those technologies, right? And of course, we sold that company in 2011, and then I started my intelligent visibility in 2013. The same or similar customers, and then expanding into the rest of the United States with other customers that I had worked with over time, are in the same, I guess, necessity category that even though what we do is completely different now, we make software versus reselling software of other manufacturers. I did have that base of customers to kind of get into phase one sales, so to speak, with our enterprise products and the other products I was talking about earlier for the desktop. So the desktop tools are more of a Mac App Store, social media. I'm constantly on Twitter and LinkedIn, advertising, little things about the Arista Navigator and the Net Toolkit, and now iPerf Agent. But Luminous, NetAssess, and iPerf Agent are more of a, I guess, my company to business sales model, meaning, I'm going to these customers, I'm going to trade shows, we are explaining the benefits of these packages to, customers that own these, either multi-million or multi-billion-dollar customers that have these large global networks that would be a possible interest for this and for our solutions. So, I just got back from the Nickel GISA conference last week in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is the North Carolina local state and government IT trade show, which is twice a year here in North Carolina. And, we had a booth, and, we were, essentially meeting people, giving away free, trade show gifts with our brand on it, of course. And you've seen the Twitter pictures, and, talking about our main products, as well as I had ironically equal interest in my Mac App Store tools and iPerf Agent as I did with Luminous and NetAssess. So it was, those are the types, I guess, of business, I guess we call it sales, that we do. And, next year we're building more of a distribution model where we will go to, companies that resell Cisco and Arista products and who also have these network management services that they provide their customers. And we'll go to them to show them how our products can help them sell more to their customers. So then that's basically, the model for the first, 4 years of our business plan to go after. So it's a little different from some of the Xojo community members, but at the end of the day, you have to, at some level, be able to sell. I think one of your podcasts, there was a great conversation with the sales, I guess, style of quoting that you guys got into, which really I listened to that very carefully because I think I encompass all of the different models that were talked about in terms of how to quote your time as a consultant for software.
Right. Yeah, that was the podcast with Tim Dietrich that we were talking about that. Yeah, I remember when he was on that thing, I was like, oh, I got to talk to Tim about this. That's some fascinating stuff there. So yeah, we've gotten a lot of feedback on that one. So that's all amazingly impressive stuff. That's awesome to hear. Now, it sounds like you banging out all these apps has allowed you to also give back to the Xojo community. And I've seen lately a lot of things you've been putting on GitHub for open source Xojo products. The one I particularly remember that is often recommended is the calendar control that you created, but there's been a couple others that I don't have the list in front of me. But care to talk about some of those and how they came about?
Sure. The calendar and time chooser, that was probably the most popular one, clearly from a, forum perspective and just from the stats on GitHub. Anything I've open sourced is because I've needed it in my apps, right? And that, as a software developer, that if you're working on larger apps, you won't release them as fast as you possibly want to, meaning, I've got needs for certain controls that if I had a smaller app that I can develop and get out the door to some customers within say a 2-month time frame, that I can, really harden these specific, tools or specific controls, then that makes it great for me to be able to implement those into my larger products that, for example, I've got, NetAssess that isn't released yet, that we keep, I keep taking these either, controls from Arista Navigator or Net Toolkit or iPerf Agent, and I take them off to a side project and I harden it a certain way. And then, hey, I'm going to open source this because I think the biggest benefit, number one, of open source for me was being able to have a purpose to create something that I need, right? And then the open source aspect was, well, I like to contribute. And then maybe the third piece of that was, and I didn't expect it at first, but the community really fed back tremendously in terms of when that calendar and time chooser started from when it ended, or at least, to where it's at now in the development cycle, is quite different because of the people feeding it back, right? Jim McKay, for example, helped tremendously with with a lot of things I wasn't good at the time, and I learned from him on that. And he helped with the custom watch, the time face graphics and the hour hands on the time chooser part, and how to properly detach my demo window from an OOP perspective. So yeah, the benefit there was tremendous in terms of seeing the feedback, them helping me make a better component or tool set, whatever I'm doing at that point, control wise. And then I dump it back into my application and from a better, a better form than it was originally. So that was that's been a great project right there. The Telnet class was my first Xojo project that I released anywhere. And, getting into the networking world, I'm like, SSH I knew wasn't going to be something I could do in terms of, really the cryptography part of that is just, really don't need to reinvent the wheel. So of course I contacted, Christian and I contracted him custom to implement that SSH library of C into one of his network toolkits or network plugins rather. So that worked out real well. And of course, Telnet, I found, I think Alex Restrepo, I think if I'm saying his name wrong, but
that sounds right.
He had a bunch of open source projects back when he was working within Real Studio. And I always admired, his ability to do, create things that were in line with what I was looking at to create. So, I kind of followed his lead, so to speak, and especially on the Telnet, project where I saw his Telnet project. And then of course, I even Twittered him to ask, hey, Alex, did you read and sift through RFCs for the Telnet details, or did you port some, C# code and whatnot? And he was like, yeah, I ported some code from VB or whatever. And I was like, cool. So then I took what he wrote and figured out, what he was doing. And then, I dove into the Telnet RFCs and implemented almost every feature that Telnet has to try to, number one, learn how to deal with protocols at a socket level, and then to really, build something for my first app. And then I released it because it helped me within the ICP software portion of my NetAssess project. So.
Yeah, I remember Telnet from back in the early 90s when I used it to connect to the school systems when I would work from my dorm or something. But I can't say I've really used it since then.
Yeah,
I didn't know it was still around.
Yeah, it is, unfortunately. SSH obviously is what you want to be using today with anything. But there's still customers that I'm sure today have, either their Cisco Arista or, Juniper network devices that still have Telnet enabled. So we still have to support it. So that was my first project to do that. And that protocol, dissecting a protocol period with RFCs, I've been a network expert for almost 18 years now, and I never really dissected a protocol at that level before, which was exactly what I needed because I needed to invent a protocol with my NetAssess project. So that was a great experience. So yeah, the open source community gives me a purpose to build certain things, either by way of I need it for my own software or I need to make it better for my software, and the community helps. And it's a win-win. The community hopefully can benefit, and we certainly do. So it's been great.
Well, that's a pretty neat story there. I'm just checking here the list of all the open source projects. I know there was more than just a couple from you.
Yeah, we've got like one, two.
See, oh, yeah, Dropbox was the other big one that you did.
Yeah, that was for specifically, I needed it for Arista Navigator. And, that's been a great example of forum feedback as well. Cause, part of a developer's, I guess, nightmare would be, it works for me. It works in my scenarios. It's not for you. And, it's kind of like you have to be, either team viewer it into their, machine to see what's happening on their side. But the forum, I guess people were having similar issues where the token wasn't getting authenticated properly, or some token issue that I never could replicate. But seemed like many of the European Xojo community members could. And, I was like, guys, if you guys could help me, please throw up some forum code and I'll implement it. And I just can't recreate it. And they did. And, ironically, about 3 days after they posted the fix, I had been trying out one of my release candidates for Arista Navigator, and I actually ran into it. So I'm like, oh, wow. So I implemented my own change code that they helped me with, and solved the issue. So, there's many different levels of experienced programmers out there, and I am certainly, experienced to a certain extent, but I'm always taking advice from the community at large, because there's so much talent out there. It's an experience in different levels. So,
well, that's the thing about coding is you're always learning. I mean, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. There's always something new to learn, and you can't just say, "Oh, that's it. I've mastered everything. I'm good to go." That's you do that. That's a disaster waiting to happen right there. So yeah, it's great. You've built lots of stuff. You've learned lots of things. You've shared what you learned. That's awesome. And I know there's lots of people that have taken advantage of the stuff you put on GitHub. I did highlight a few of them, I think, in the Xojo add-ons webinar I did a couple months ago.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, absolutely. And you did a great job putting all of our open source projects on the Xojo website too. So I know right now my workload's been very, very high. So I apologize to everyone out there. I have about 3, repositories I need to update tremendously. So I hear you on the forums, and I'm working on it.
Yes. And to let people know how busy Mike has been, this is our 3rd try at doing this podcast, because Mike's schedule has been so crazy. And we finally were able to fit some time in to do it. And I feel your pain. At XDC, I had a customer flag me down because I had some pull requests for a Xojo unit that were sitting out on GitHub that I had neglected for months. And he kind of was shaking me. You got to get these approved. I really need these changes in so I can use the standard version. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. And it's easy to get. It's not easy, but once you get to the point where you've built the thing and then you get it out there, you're like, and then these changes come in and you got to review the changes. You got to kind of test them out. You got to see if it's actually a change you want to put in the project as a whole. And then sometimes it's easier to say, I'll deal with that later. And later becomes a lot later. And then people get cranky. But
yeah, no. And you guys have done a great job rolling out, new version after new version on the new framework, of course. And, I'm still on Xojo 2014 R21. iOS is a big target for me. Just not right now. It will be in about 3 months when I need companion apps for my business apps here that we write. But for right now, I'm not. So I've made some considerations, changes on the calendar control, and actually Jim helped me as well with the new framework. So, but I definitely there's so many things I'm reading on the forums of increased speed, like your JSON objects, classes are incredibly faster now with the new framework. So I really look forward to diving into the new framework more so, and probably towards the middle of the summer, based on my workload right now. But it's very encouraging, especially with the Raspberry Pi announcements that I read after XDC. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it this year.
Yes, we definitely missed you there.
Oh, I love those events. So of course, you remember I went to the one in Vegas, and I definitely agreed with a lot of the people. It was fun, but we missed the socializing piece of, I guess, the small knit area. And Vegas is definitely not a small knit area. So I was going to ask you how it went down in Texas.
Oh, yeah. In Texas, it was great. It was the complete opposite of Vegas from that perspective. I mean, we pretty much took control of the hotel. It was, they could have hung a new sign up in front of, I guess it was a Radisson. It said Xojo or something. Because, it was just Xojo people everywhere. The lobby wasn't big. So, you get a few Xojo people out there and all of a sudden it's a Xojo lobby and you get a bunch of groups talking. And the same with the bar area. And we had the whole second floor for the conferences, or for the conference. And we had 2 rooms. And it just worked out great. The 2 rooms were big. And they had big glass. One of the rooms anyway it was, unlike Vegas where you didn't know what time of day it was in the conference rooms. There's no windows anywhere. You had to walk like 10 minutes to get to a window where you could actually look outside. This conference room had giant windows in the room that, floor to ceiling windows that looked out to the river and trees. And it was just a much better, relaxing, inviting atmosphere. And it was just very comfortable. The food preparation was nice, open in the area so people could get their food and mingle. So it was definitely different than Vegas. It was much more close-knit. I think people really liked it a lot better than Vegas. I think people liked the idea of going to Vegas, but didn't necessarily like the idea of being in Vegas for the conference. So I think that's what it came down to. So yeah, we're evaluating something similar for our next conference, and so we'll definitely keep it like this sort of thing, which is what people really prefer, I think. And of course, everything was recorded this year, so that will be good for the people that weren't able to make it. All right, let me see here. I'm checking. Oh, you mentioned one thing about the open source projects, and yes, they are all listed in the Xojo wiki right now, but it's just a gigantic, big, long list that is kind of hard to parse. So I am in the process of mentally working through how I'm going to reorganize this to make it easier to find stuff. Because when I started this list, there was only a handful of open source projects. Literally like maybe 5, and now there's got to be, looking at this list is probably 30. And so I'd like to get them grouped a little bit better and make it a little easier for people to find stuff. So I'll probably you can expect on the new doc site to start to see that sort of thing appearing there. That's kind of the place where newer, better organized documentation is going to show up as we kind of phase things from the old stuff to the new stuff. So, and certainly, as I like to remind listeners, if you come across an open source project that you might think we don't know about, or you definitely have seen it's not on the site, or we don't have linked anywhere, let me know. We want people to find these things, so by all means, let me know. All right. Well, one other thing that I have here on my list from the Vegas conference when you were there and we were talking, something that came up regarding you is that you used to play professional hockey. And I found that personally absolutely fascinating. My wife played hockey in college. I can barely stand on a pair of skates, and and I'm in Maine. There's ice here like all the time, right? But I was like, really? Because as I was talking to Mike about this earlier, you don't see a lot of people that play professional sports in any manner transition to becoming network experts and then programmers and that sort of thing. So tell us a little bit about your hockey experience and where you played and how that worked and how you ended up switching from hockey or transitioning from doing that to what you do now.
Yeah, it's a funny tie, but yeah, it goes back from when I was 15. I left home. I played minor hockey in New York. I grew up in Long Island, New York. Of course, when I got to a point where, the hockey where I grew up wasn't as competitive as, well, today it's much different, but when I was a kid, it wasn't as competitive as I would have liked. So I left home when I was 15 to go live with, housing parents in Ontario, Canada. And I was able to, by the time I was 15, I played, in their minor hockey program in a small town in Ontario. And then I was able to start playing junior B hockey. And then I made it to junior A hockey. And, from a junior perspective in Canada, junior A hockey is, the most popular form of hockey before the NHL, from an amateur point of view. So, for example, in many of our games, we'd have 5,000, 6,000 fans coming to our games, wow. Little 16, 17, 18-year-olds, being able to play in front of 5,000 people is pretty amazing. And then it just kept getting more, more professional feeling and more money from a team as they owned, the owners that owned the teams would put more money to it as the levels got bigger. So by the time I got to, junior A in Alberta, we were in Olds, Alberta, which is not too far from Norm. You're what does he call himself? The senior engineer, or the senior engineer?
Norman Pilardi, the Xojo senior engineer, as he likes to say.
I loved his podcast on that. That was great. Ironically, it's not too far from where Norm lives, and I think he quote unquote said that he lives in the middle of nowhere. But it was I think at the time maybe 6,000 people or so in Olds, Alberta. Was the smallest junior A hockey city in Canada, and ironically, we had won 2 Canadian championships. When at least the era that I played junior A out there. So, but yeah, junior A in Canada is huge, and in Olds we get about 4,000 to 5,000 people a game. And, on up to where we had to take a 10-hour bus ride to Fort McMurray right near where it got very cold. You'd have snow in August. We'd have about 7,000 people coming to our games then. So it was a great experience, being able to, have a job at 16, 17, 18 that, you can be released at any time for the most part. It's a very high level from a hockey perspective. There's always somebody waiting to take your place, so to speak. And that is to a certain extent, when you're in the first half of the season, it's a game by game basis, unless, you're a seasoned veteran that is just doing very well. Right. So there was a number of years where I was fighting for my job on a daily basis. And, that kind of, I guess, formed my work ethic early on in my career, which ironically takes me to, by the time I was 19, I wasn't drafted in the NHL drafts, where I was rated a few times, but never did get drafted. And I was kind of disappointed because many of the goalies that I was playing against of my same age were being drafted. And I was like, hey, I'm better than that guy. Of course, naturally, right? But, clearly not from a scout's perspective. So, I was able to play juniors a little longer, and, got to a point where I would graduate high school already. And I was like an American playing hockey on a work permit. I couldn't do anything else, meaning I couldn't work at the local convenience store or pizza delivery guy at 17 or 18.
Oh,
19.
I couldn't do only hockey that you were allowed to do. Okay.
I could only play hockey as an American in Canada. So what did I do? Well, I ran a BBS. I was always into the computer since the Commodore 64 days, like a lot of our listeners, right? And I programmed BASIC, and I did a lot of that as a kid. And, by the time I got my, I think it was like my Acer, DX266 computer, I was 19, and, I think I was using Quick Basic at the time, writing some statistics software for my hockey, my goalie statistics, right? It was funny because some of my hockey colleagues were in the local college at Olds College and taking, quick, basic classes, and I was helping them with it. I was like, hey, I'm pretty good at this. And anyway, so I got into, running a BBS while I was playing hockey, and I thought that was kind of cool, interacting with people that would call in on my, I guess 9600 baud modem back then. And so I was a sysop for a while, and that got me into the computer world. So back then, if you remember, we were building our own PCs. We were very, I guess, instrumental or very intimate with the components and the drivers, and everything was pretty manual back then.
Right.
Dip switches, right? So, IRQ management, it was fun.
I don't miss that.
I don't miss it either, but that got me to it was fun for me, but I didn't really know it was kind of building up some skills that I actually could use by the time I was 20. When I was 20, again, undrafted, I walked on in Anchorage to the Anchorage Aces, which at the time was the WCHL, which now is the ECHL, or, which is across the U.S. for, minor professional hockey. And I was able to stick with them for about 4 months. And then, being a unsigned, rookie, 24-hour contracts were the standard. And the other goalie that was there was, I believe on a 2-way contract with an NHL team and then an American League team, which was above where we were at. And then all it took was another guy to come down from someplace else, and the 24/7 guy was gone. So literally it was like, all right, see ya. Thanks. I'm like, great. So they put me on waivers, and just, being an I guess, unproven rookie goalie in that league at that time. I cleared waivers very quickly, and then I'm like, all right, I'm going home. Yeah. So I went home, went back and figured out, hey, I need to work. And, I was like, well, I'm going to try to turn, my computer stuff into a job. And, I was able to get a job at a local internet provider doing help desk support for Netscape 1.0, customers, TCP WinSock problem solutions, that kind of thing back in the day.
Yeah.
I was able to use my computer building skills there as well. And, that got me into working with, a person that was working there as a programmer, just an awesome, Perl programmer. He was working on his master's degree at the university locally where we were at. And, I was able to see, he's like, wow, that guy is really smart. And he had a bit of an ego. So I'm like, I like that, and he's obviously making some money, and I need to kind of go that route a little bit. And, so I started learning Linux. I started learning C and Perl, all kind of within the same, I guess literally the same time frame. And then I think about 4 months later, the Cisco engineer that was working at our ISP quit, went got a different job, and I was like, hey, you want to be the Cisco guy? I'm like, sure. I was barely 20 and I didn't even know what a router was. Never mind. They showed me what to do. Yeah, great. I did that, but I didn't really know what the heck I was doing until I was about 21, 22. So it got me in the door, got me skills with Cisco, with Linux, with system administration, to where I could go get my next job at 21 with a insurance company, a large insurance company in that area. And that really started my path down the road of really understanding what I was doing, reading a lot of books, doing a lot of labs, working in that job. So I even did some cold fusion development back then for, if you remember those days.
I remember cold fusion. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did a little bit of everything. And then by the time I was, I guess, 23, I moved to St. Louis, and I took a job with MasterCard International, and I did nothing but Cisco work, right? Cisco equipment, so Cisco network engineering, and, for MasterCard. So it was a very, I guess, opportunity to learn networking and telecommunications and, physical layer at massive, depths. And then went from there. So I worked there for about 2 years. And then I actually got a job at Cisco, and I worked at Cisco Systems for almost 4 years. And then, at that time I moved to North Carolina with Cisco, and, met my now wife, and, I was kind of, got to a point at Cisco where it was a great company to work for back in the early, I guess late 90s, early 2000s. But I kind of got bored in the position where I was at. I was working in a group called Advanced Services, and, I worked on, Verizon G&I's global network, as well as Verizon Wireless's IT, voice network and data network back then. So it got a little, repetitive for me. So I went ahead and left Cisco at that time to go work for a local Cisco partner in, Greensboro. And I was able to, transition into what they call the channel, I guess, the channel organization.
It's 11 o'clock.
And there's my clock. And then, sorry about that.
A talking clock. That's a cool thing.
Yeah. And so I got into, working with direct customers locally in North Carolina and South Carolina and Virginia with what we did, and consulting, Cisco network consulting, and did that for, 4 or 5 years. And then, that's where I worked with my then, colleague, Bill Demarest, and we then started a company called Confiance IP Solutions. And, we did, similar type of things that we were doing at that last company, but we felt like we did them a little bit differently, right? So we were able to build that company up on the same technologies and services, and then we built our own services into that. And but yeah, so it all came from hockey, right? So being that guy that couldn't work, outside of playing hockey, which we spent a lot of time, but clearly I had other time to spend, and I worked on computers, and that got me connected. Which I tell that story, people are like, "Wow, that's kind of interesting." I didn't do the normal computer science route that a lot of people
right.
usually do, and but I wouldn't trade it in for the world, because that work ethic was instilled early, and just having that feeling for fighting for something at an early age. Some people do that in college, some people do that in the military. I did that playing hockey, which some people chuckle at, but if you are from any of the areas that have junior hockey in Canada, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But I think it's funny, because I didn't realize this. I have no idea if it's the same time frame or not, but Norm Pilardi's daughter went to Olds College, which is the same town I played junior A hockey in, probably not the same time frame, But it was funny because we did a lot of our players went to Olds College, and we worked out at Olds College. So it's kind of funny how many ties Norm and I have together before we even knew it. So
it is. Well, that's way more interesting than probably most people's progression, through the traditional way to end up creating software and running their own business.
It's certainly different.
Well, that was absolutely fascinating. What a great story. All right. Well, I think that probably means we've reached the end of this Xojo Talk. As sad as it may be, the time always comes. So I want to thank you, Mike, for being on Xojo Talk this time.
Thank you, Paul.
And until next time, thanks for listening, everybody.